Consciousness is a very dynamic and fluid thing with human beings and animals. See, the fight or flight mechanism is what's causing all of human problems. It's really adulterating the expression of intelligence, creativity in the human experience. And the dynamic of fight or flight was not developed for beings with language as well as the type of comprehensive consciousness human beings have. Like, human beings can contemplate and understand life and death, right? Like, on an intellectual level, animals cannot. You see why it's important to understand the constraining impact of fight or flight on the human mind by looking at what it does in animals, is so that you can understand how this affects the total sum of consciousness available to a wakeful human experience. The the tunnel vision of fight or flight is to cause the exclusion of awareness and sensory information to the animal as to adulterate its decision making. It needs to do that because, see, the animal does not have the ability to make decisions based on an understanding of consequences. And so the decision making of the animal is emotional and situational. But, like, let's say if my dog Turbo encountered a mountain lion, right? He gets triggered into fight or flight. He starts to run. Well, what would happen if my dog was running by a bush and he caught the odor of another dog on the bush? Is he would stop and he would go to lift his leg, because that's an instinctive behavior, right? Or if he caught the scent of a female dog in heat, then he would stop and he would get distracted. Or if he saw a ball bouncing, he would want to chase the ball, or maybe a bird or a rabbit. And so, because my dog Turbo does not really think about the consequences of the mountain lion, it only knows it's afraid and it knows to run. See, the fight or flight is really a simple decision-making apparatus for the survival of animals that are not conscious. And so what it does is it eliminates the awareness of the peripheral realities around the animal, causing them to fixate and attach to the threat as a way to have the whole reality of the animal dominated by the threat. So all decisions that the animal makes are going to have a relationship to the threat. And that's why it's fight or flight. And so it simplifies the reality to ensure a higher likelihood of survival. But you see, that's what happens to the human being. You see, what happens in enlightenment is a relaxation of this exclusory, inhibitory mechanism that when the child at the age of 3, 4, 5 has their first stress reaction, the child will feel the same fear as any animal. And the fear is that there's something wrong here. And the something wrong is always another animal. But see, for the human being, the something wrong always translates into something's wrong with me. Because the something wrong, coupled with all the physiological changes of the sympathetic nervous system's complete domination of the human body, where the adrenaline, the pupils dilate, the heart rate kicks up, the breathing, the butterflies, tingling sensations, numbness. It causes tremendous confusion. But you see, this is where the experiential abandonment happens for all people, where the caregiver, through the fear of death in the state of survival caused by this sympathetic nervous system activation due to anything like a loud yell of the parent. It could be yelling at the child or yelling at another parent. It doesn't matter what it is. The activation of the fight or flight system is primitive. And the child will interpret the parents as the threat, as an animalistic fear to the parents. But coupled with the thought of something's wrong with me, they will patternize everything. You see, they will feel frozen. The fight or flight automatically tries to assess the risk, and it will calculate that the child is not big enough to fight daddy and mommy. Automatically, they will feel paralyzed. They're stuck And so the paralysis is just some level of awareness that they can't get away, they can't fight back, they get stuck. I'm stuck, paralyzed. This is why you think you're broken, is because for the first time your body doesn't respond to thinking. You're trying to think and you're trying to move, you're trying to figure it out. You can't. Also, your brain shuts down. You see, the fight or flight tunnel vision forces you into this situation, this dynamic with your parents or the environment, where you lose the plasticity of your intelligence. You cannot figure it out. That's why there's confusion. The confusion is resulting also from the tunnel vision, the exclusion of any awareness of what's happening. The child goes blank. They don't know what's happening because the psychology of the fight or flight is based on the exclusion of all information unrelated to the threat. Well, you see, when the child said there's something wrong with me, they objectified themselves as the cause of the reaction. And so every single thought thereafter becomes patternized as an external threat to the life of the child. I'm not good enough is an external threat. Something's wrong with me, external threat, broken, external threat, helpless, stuck, external threats. And so the child is now generating the architecture of a subjective, illusory reality that the child will survive for the rest of their life. Because this is a projection onto reality, and the child is always in reality, the child will never leave fight or flight. I'm not good enough will be projected onto the parents and reacted to by figuring it out in the same confusion that causes the elimination of the objective awareness of the actual situation the child is within. And for the rest of this human being's life, they will be locked in tunnel vision, operating within a very basic fight or flight intellectual dynamic that is always going to be about becoming good enough, fixing or changing oneself, fixing and changing one's immediate reality as to attempt to overcome the projected self that is an overlay for everything in an inescapable paradigm where the human being now has to create an illusory future, a someday future of happiness as the only exit, as the only way to survive this hell that was created at 4 or 5 years old. The person lives into a happy future, idealizing mom and dad. They idealize mom and dad to try to be happy, to try to fantasize that they're not afraid of them. And so now when you go out into life, you do that. You're afraid of abandonment, and so you conceal your fears by idealizing. You use confusion to avoid the triggering of abandonment by avoiding the confrontation of reality. And so this confusion is a constant dissociation, maintaining the tunnel vision, maintaining a blockade on objective reality, because the objective reality violates a multitude of triggers at all times. And these triggers create the aversion to their own selves. And so the human being will live in avoidance of, in fear of, in flight of the very triggers they anticipate activating by taking a test. And so the person will live in reactionary fear of things that don't exist, their own projected overlay to reality. Everyone knows what heartbreak is. Everyone knows the fear of that big test. You see, these things become big only because of our anticipatory reaction towards those things experienced within the inescapable dynamic of fight or flight that created the entire subjective reality of all people. A reality only escaped by those who reach the so-called satori or enlightenment or transformation. But now being able to explain this in ordinary psychology and having developed the methodology to cause any man, woman, or child to escape, it's now really available for everyone. And all it's going to take is getting the world of psychology to listen and let me demonstrate the efficacy of this understanding. It's undeniable. It is what causes the whole human condition.